I never imagined how quiet a house could become until my husband, Carl, left on his latest long-haul trip. The hum of the refrigerator, the occasional creak of the floorboards, those were my companions now. Carl has been a trucker for over 15 years, and I've learned to live with his absences, but this time it felt heavier. A month had passed without a single night of his familiar breathing beside me, and the silence had begun to echo. Michael, my son, had just turned 18. A strong, focused young man with broad shoulders and sun-kissed skin from hours on the tennis courts. He'd grown so fast, too fast it seemed. I still remembered holding his tiny hand in mine, wiping the sweat from his brow when he first had a fever as a toddler. Now he towers over me, with a grin that's both boyish and somehow quietly confident. I work as a rehabilitation therapist, helping patients rebuild themselves piece by piece, limbs, hope, dignity. The irony was not lost on me. I spent my days healing others, while quietly nursing my own wounds from solitude. Michael and I had developed a rhythm in Carl's absence. He'd come home from practice, sweaty and flushed, toss his bag near the front door, and head straight to the kitchen where I'd usually be chopping vegetables or steeping tea. Our conversations had matured in recent months, often drifting into topics I never expected: philosophy, relationships, dreams. He listened more attentively now, and he looked at me, really looked. It happened on a Tuesday. He limped through the door, wincing, trying to hide it with a lopsided smile. "Took a weird fall during practice," he muttered. My instincts kicked in. I had him on the couch before he could protest. "Show me," I said gently, kneeling beside him. He hesitated, then slowly pulled up his shorts. His left hip was swollen, flushed purple and angry. "Michael," I breathed, my fingers hovering before they made contact. He flinched, just slightly, as I pressed along the crest of his hip. "I'll be fine," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "You're not fine," I replied. "You're benched until I say otherwise." He groaned. "Come on, Mom." But he didn't argue again. I wrapped an ice pack in a towel and handed it to him. "Lay back. I'll monitor the swelling, and we'll do gentle mobilization later." That was the beginning of our new routine. Each evening, I'd finish my paperwork, then retreat into the living room where Michael would be stretched out on the couch, a pillow under his head, his hip bare and waiting for my attention. It was clinical at first. I'd press and hold, stretch and rotate. We'd talk about his recovery, about the championship he might miss, about how empty the house felt. But with every session, something began to shift. I noticed the way his gaze lingered just a second longer than before. The way he'd catch my hand in his sometimes, absent-mindedly, as if needing the reassurance. The way he looked at me, not like a boy needing his mother, but like a man trying to understand a woman he's suddenly seeing in a new light. And God help me, I noticed too. How his voice dropped an octave when he spoke softly. How his touch, even when accidental, made my breath catch in a way I hadn't felt in years. There was a warmth between us, simmering just under the surface, unspoken but undeniably there. I told myself it was just the intimacy of caregiving. It would pass. But then came the night the power went out. We'd just sat down for dinner, soup and garlic bread, when everything went black. I reached for my phone instinctively, but the screen had gone dark. "Battery's dead," I muttered. Michael shrugged. "I'll get the candles." Minutes later, we sat in the soft amber glow of flickering waxlight. The storm outside rumbled like a distant drum. The air between us felt charged, like static waiting for a spark. "It's kind of nice," he said, his voice low. "You and me like this. No distractions." I nodded, my fingers wrapped tightly around the warm ceramic of my mug. "We used to have blackouts all the time when you were little. Remember?" He grinned. "You used to read me ghost stories." I laughed. "And you'd refuse to sleep in your own bed after." He looked at me then, really looked. The way Carl used to, before the distance and the miles stretched thin the threads between us. "Do you miss Dad?" he asked quietly. The question caught me off guard. I blinked. "Of course," I said. "It's just hard. Being alone so much." He reached across the table, his hand brushing mine. "You're not alone." My breath caught. And in that moment, the room, the flickering candles, the storm, it all blurred into a strange, intimate stillness. The storm passed, but something had stayed behind. A residue. Michael's question, that quiet, loaded "you're not alone," lingered in the air long after the candles burned low and the power returned. Something had shifted between us. Neither of us named it. Neither of us dared. But it was there, unspoken, undeniable. The next morning, I busied myself with dishes, the clatter of porcelain barely enough to drown out the thoughts whispering in the corners of my mind. Was it just comfort? A boy reaching for the only warmth left in a cold house? Or was it something deeper, something neither of us had the vocabulary for? Michael limped in, shirtless, his hair damp from the shower, sweatpants hanging low on his hips. "Morning," he said, casually, but his eyes watched me with that same quiet awareness. Hips still stiff. I nodded, drying my hands. "Come to the den. I'll check it." We moved through the motions, stretch, rotate, ice. But the distance between us had shrunk. Each touch buzzed louder. Each shared glance stretched longer. Then, as I pressed gently against the tightness near his outer hip, he winced and muttered, "You know you're great with this." "It's my job," I said, smiling. "No, I mean, you're better than anyone I've ever seen." He looked up at me. "But what if I helped you help me?" I raised a brow. "Help you how?"
A massage.
"Like a healing one. Muscle release. In the bathhouse." The idea hit me like a gust of steam, sudden, disarming. The bathhouse. I echoed, unsure if I'd heard right. "Yeah," he said, shifting on the couch. "You always said heat helps soft tissue recover. Plus, it's private. Quiet. Feels more freeing." I hesitated. That place had always been my sanctuary, a warm cedar cocoon where I could let go of the world. But the thought of sharing it with Michael now, of being surrounded by heat and silence and his closeness, it felt like stepping onto thin ice with bare feet. Still, I found myself nodding. That evening, we packed towels, a thermos of mint tea, and the muscle oil I usually used for my clients. The bathhouse was quiet, nestled behind the old recreation center where hardly anyone ventured after dusk. The air was thick with steam and the scent of eucalyptus. The wooden walls glistened slightly, droplets collecting like morning dew. Michael stripped to his towel without hesitation, his movements relaxed, natural. I turned away, giving him space, but my heart thudded in my chest with every second. "Come on in," he called, already settled on the wooden bench, his broad back turned to me. I wrapped my own towel tighter around my waist and stepped in. The heat wrapped around me instantly, sinking into my muscles, fogging my thoughts. He leaned forward slightly, exposing his back to me. "Start here." I uncapped the oil and poured a thin stream into my palm, warming it between my hands before placing them gently on his shoulders. His skin was warm, solid, familiar, but not. The moment my fingers pressed into his muscles, I felt his breath catch. "You okay?" I asked softly. "Yeah," he said, his voice huskier than usual. "You just have really strong hands." I worked in silence, sliding over each ridge and knot, watching the tension melt from his body. But the tension inside me only grew. The intimacy of it, the low moans he couldn't suppress, the way his body shifted under my touch, the steam curling around us, it was overwhelming. Every muscle in my body was taut, every breath measured. Then, as I moved down to his lower back, his voice cut through the fog. "Do you ever think about how weird this all is?" he asked quietly. "Like, how close we've gotten?" My hands paused. "I mean," he added quickly, not in a bad way. "It just feels like we're different now. Not like before. I've noticed, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. He turned his head slightly, eyes meeting mine in the dim, steam-filled light. And, does it scare you? I swallowed. A little. He nodded, then leaned back into my hands. It doesn't scare me. Those 4 words shattered what was left of my restraint. I didn't answer. I just kept moving, my hands softer now, slower. The atmosphere shifted, thicker, heavier. I could see the pulse at his neck. I could feel my own heartbeat in my fingertips. He reached back, one hand brushing my knee, just a touch, but it was enough. "Mom," he said, his voice lower than I'd ever heard it. "Is this wrong?" I froze. The steam whispered around us. My hands trembled slightly, still resting on his skin. "I don't know," I whispered back. "But I can't stop feeling it." He turned then, fully, towel still secure but body facing mine. His eyes searched mine, not with confusion, but with certainty. There was no teasing, no game. Just raw, vulnerable honesty. We sat there, surrounded by heat, silence, and something unnameable that hovered between us, demanding to be acknowledged. The steam clung to us like a second skin. I sat motionless, my palms still faintly glistening with oil, the scent of mint and cedar drifting between us. Michael hadn't moved either. His eyes locked on mine, not demanding, not pleading, just open, as if waiting for me to exhale first, to break the spell or lean into it. I could hear his breath. I could feel mine trembling in my chest. "Do you feel it too?" he asked quietly. I nodded, barely. His throat bobbed with a swallow. I thought I was going crazy. But now, he didn't finish the thought. He didn't have to. He leaned forward, slow and careful, not to trap me but to be closer. I didn't lean away. I couldn't. The space between us had grown so thick it almost crackled. "I didn't plan any of this," I whispered. "It just happened. Over time. And now it's too much to ignore," he finished. I closed my eyes. The silence was no longer soft. It pulsed between us. The bathhouse walls closed in, the steam no longer comforting. It was dizzying. Everything in me screamed to get up, to walk away, to restore the line that had always protected us. But I didn't move. He shifted closer, his knee brushing mine. It was the smallest contact, yet it was a match to dry grass. "You can stop this if you want," he said, voice low, thick. "Say one word, and I'll step back. I swear." I opened my eyes to find his gaze on me, steady, unflinching. This wasn't impulsive, not a fleeting teenage rebellion or curiosity. It was something built brick by brick, moment by moment, in the silences, the glances, the gentle care we'd shared for weeks. And maybe longer than that. "I don't know what I want," I whispered. "That's the problem." "Then let me show you what I feel," he said. "And if it's too much, I'll stop." The moment suspended, trembling like a leaf in wind. Then he reached up, not to grab or hold, but to brush a loose strand of hair behind my ear. The touch was feather-light, almost reverent. My skin burned under it. Still, I didn't pull away. "I missed this," he murmured. Connection. Closeness. Not since Dad left. "You and I," he broke off, looking down. "It felt like we were all we had. And somewhere along the way, I stopped thinking of you as just my mom." A shiver ran through me, not from cold, but from the weight of the confession. "I thought I was broken," I said. "Thinking these things. Feeling this." "You're not," he said. "You're just human." His hand hovered again, this time landing lightly on my shoulder. It wasn't inappropriate. It wasn't demanding. But the heat of it traveled through me like a surge. I looked down, unsure, my towel damp against my skin, clinging in ways that made me hyper-aware of every breath, every heartbeat. "I've dreamed of this," he said quietly. "Not just this room. But being close to you like this. No walls. No rules. Just you. The air sizzled between us. Something inside me cracked. Maybe it was the weeks of emotional starvation. Maybe it was the hollow silence left by Carl's absence. Maybe it was that, for the first time in years, someone saw me, not as a wife, not as a caregiver, not as a therapist, but as a woman. And not just someone. Michael. My son. But also not a boy anymore. I reached for his hand slowly, threading my fingers through his. His breath hitched. Then show me, I said, my voice barely a whisper. What you feel.
He leaned in.
But just as his forehead touched mine, the wooden door creaked faintly, the sound sharp and sudden in the humid air. We froze. Did you hear that? I whispered, my heart pounding. He nodded, tense. Maybe just the wind. We waited silence again. But the moment had broken just slightly, enough for my pulse to gallop, for reality to seep in through the cracks. Still, I didn't let go of his hand. He brought my fingers to his lips, kissed them once, soft, deliberate, electric. Next time, he murmured against them. I won't stop. The silence returned, but it was no longer soothing. It pressed in, thick as steam, as if the walls of the bathhouse were bearing witness to something they weren't meant to see. Michael didn't speak. Neither did I. We just sat there, still holding hands, breaths uneven, hearts rattling like fragile glass under the weight of everything unspoken. Then, without a word, he moved. Slow. Gentle. His hand lifted mine, resting it over my own chest. Then he moved behind me, kneeling on the wooden bench so that I felt the heat of him at my back. His breath hovered near my neck, warm and unhurried. His fingers slid over my shoulders, guiding me with wordless care until I leaned slightly forward. I should have stopped him, but I didn't. Instead, I felt his hands press lightly against my upper chest, just below the collarbones, where tension coils and emotion knots itself like thread. His thumbs began a slow, circular motion, moving downward with precision, trained, measured. Healing. And yet more. His hands moved with reverence, not lust. Not urgency. He worked carefully, gliding lower, fingers spread wide across the muscles he'd memorized from weeks of watching me treat others. But now, I was the one receiving. For once, I was the one unraveling. And I let him. A tremor rippled through me. Not fear, not shame, but release. I could feel the air change around us. His breath had shortened. Mine caught with every downward pass. Each motion was careful, full of restraint, but trembling on the edge of something far more honest. I turned toward him, unable to help it. Our faces were inches apart now, the warmth of the bathhouse rising between us like invisible threads, pulling us closer. I didn't know what I would find in his eyes, guilt? Hesitation? But there was only clarity. A soft ache, and something tender that had nothing to do with the heat. Then he leaned in. No pretense. No hesitation. And kissed me. It was soft at first, like the sigh of a confession released into the dark. Then deeper. Slower. A kiss that asked and answered the same question. Are we really doing this?
Yes.
I gripped the towel at my chest, breathless, as he pulled back just slightly, his forehead resting against mine, his hands still steady, still warm where they touched. I've wanted this, he whispered. I swallowed hard. Me too. Outside, the world continued as if nothing had changed. But inside that steam-filled room, nothing would ever be the same again.